Today I have 3 delicious dips that you can try. Maybe you've been tasked with bringing an appetizer, or maybe you are hosting and looking for something to add to the menu. But whatever the situation, one or all of these dips might fit the bill for you. Keep watching for White Bean Bruschetta, Spinach Artichoke, and Caramelized Onion dip recipes, or check the timestamps for a particular recipe if you don't want all 3. First up is the quickest of the 3 dips to prepare. It's a white bean bruschetta, and it is sweet with the tomatoes, taking from the balsamic, with just a hint of a bite from the red onions and a nice mellow hint of basil. It is a great cold dip for any get-together, and it can be whipped up in just 10 to 15 minutes. It keeps well in the fridge for several days, so you can make it ahead and have one less thing to worry about on a busy holiday. To make it, you're going to start by adding about 10 to 15 basil leaves that have been roughly chopped to a bowl or glass storage container, along with a half teaspoon of kosher salt and 1 garlic clove that has been grated or very finely minced. I like grating it because I don't love big chunks of garlic in this one. Once in the bowl, you're going to take a spoon and begin to mash the basil leaves with the back of the spoon. The coarseness of the salt will kind of help to break down those leaves a bit. Doing this helps release some of the flavorful oil from the basil leaves. You're really just trying to get the most flavor out of those leaves. So mash that around until you get kind of a paste going for about a minute or so. And then you're going to add 1 tablespoon of oil, 1 tablespoon of balsamic vinegar, and 1 teaspoon of nutritional yeast, and stir everything together to create a dressing for the salad. To this, you're going to add 1 can of drained and rinsed small white beans. Small white beans, great northern beans, or navy beans work really well here. Then you're going to add 1 pint of cherry tomatoes that has been diced up, or about 1.5 cups of diced tomatoes. A quarter of red onion that has been finely diced, or about 2 tablespoons of diced red onion. I like to keep the onions tiny so that you're not getting a big bite of onion, and it helps to nicely flavor the dip without it being overpowering. Now you're going to stir everything together until it's fully combined, and then you can either serve it immediately or allow it to sit in the fridge for several hours for the flavors to really blend and intensify. This makes it a great dish to make in the morning before things get busy, or even the night before. If you don't have time to let it sit, it is still flavorful and delicious when eaten right away. Now you can add it to a bowl or platter and serve alongside some sliced baguette pieces, pita chips, or some lovely seeded crackers. Bagel chips would also work really well here. This dip is sweet and tangy and a little bit tart, and just oh so delicious. The next stop on our dip trio tour is a spinach artichoke. Instead of cream cheese or heavy cream or sour cream, the base for this dip is made with my go-to combination of blended nuts, beans, and vegetable broth. This recipe makes a decent sized batch. It works really well if you make it ahead and then heat it up before serving. I also like that it's a big batch because if you're getting things ready for a holiday and you have a busy few days, you can make this recipe, reserve half for the appetizer served during holiday festivities, and then you can use the other half as a sauce for pasta. It makes a quick dinner the night before a holiday get-together, and then it's a kind of 2-for-1 situation. I always like making things that have dual purposes when you're busy around the holidays. To make this one, first you're going to make the cream base for the dip. To your blender, you'll add a can of drained and rinsed white beans. These were cannellini beans, but any bean will do, and then add a half cup of sunflower seeds or cashews, and 2 cups of vegetable broth. I'm using sunflower seeds here because it's a great option and often cheaper than cashews, and they function very similarly in this recipe. But use whatever you have on hand or what is easiest to acquire. Then just blend these ingredients up and set it aside while you start the dip. Heat a pot on the stove over medium-high heat, and once hot, add a tablespoon or a splash of oil. Allow that to heat up for a few moments, and then add 1 medium to large onion that has been diced. This is about 1.5 to 2 cups of diced onion. Saute this for about 7 to 10 minutes, stirring every couple of minutes until the onions are beginning to soften and turn translucent, and maybe just brown a bit along the edges. A bit of sticking is good here, and you can scrape this up when you stir the onions around. If it's sticking too much or burning, you can just add a tiny splash of water to scrape that up. As long as it's not burning, I don't mind it sticking just a bit because I know that the artichokes that I add in a few minutes have some liquid to them, and they'll help deglaze the pan and lift those browned bits up. Okay, so to the sauteed onions, you can add 3 cloves of garlic that have been minced, a half teaspoon of kosher salt, 1 teaspoon of cumin, a quarter teaspoon of nutmeg, and a quarter to a half teaspoon of crushed red pepper flakes, depending on how much of a kick you want. Now stir this all around, allowing the garlic and spices to cook for about 1 minute. I like to stir this pretty consistently so that the garlic doesn't burn. Now you add 1 jar of roughly chopped artichoke hearts. The jar I used was 14.5 ounces, which I think might not be as common of a size at every grocery store, so any amount close to that will do. The ones I used were grilled and marinated, and I like the grilled ones because there's a bit more flavor when things are browned or grilled, and using an item like this that's already browned is just a simple way to add more flavor to the dish without much effort, besides finding it at the grocery store. If you can't find grilled ones, it's not a big deal. Regular marinated artichokes will be just fine here too. It's one of those things that if you can easily find it and they're comparable in price, go ahead and use them for the bit of extra flavor they'll add. But if they're difficult to find or way pricier, they're definitely not going to make or break the recipe by any means. Now stir all of this together. Now you'll add the blended cream you made earlier, 1 tablespoon of Dijon mustard, and a quarter cup of nutritional yeast, and stir everything together. You'll now let this simmer for about 10 minutes, stirring every couple of minutes or so. You'll notice it start to thicken up a bit as it simmers. Now you can add about 5 ounces of roughly chopped fresh spinach, or somewhere around 4 cups of roughly chopped spinach, and stir everything to combine. Frozen chopped spinach also works well here, and you can add a full bag's worth to achieve essentially the same result. Now you'll let this simmer for another 10 to 15 minutes, again stirring every few minutes until the dip has thickened considerably. Here you can taste and adjust your seasonings if necessary. You'll see here that I saved the jar of liquid that the artichoke hearts came in. The one I'm using was a nice blend of oil and vinegar and was decently tangy, so I added a couple teaspoons of that liquid to bring out the acidity in the dish. If yours were only marinated in oil or water, that won't work well here, and you can add a squeeze of lemon juice or a tiny splash of red wine vinegar if you feel like the dip could really use just a little something. Now you can transfer the dip to a serving dish. I like to use one that is heat proof so that I can heat up the dip before serving if I'm not serving it immediately. You can see here that I'm putting it in a small casserole dish. I like this especially if you're traveling to someone else's house for a holiday party, as the sides of the dish help keep everything in place and you can cover it in foil and not fear things sliding around in the car on your way over. Now the last one we're going to make is a caramelized onion dip. This dip takes the longest to prepare, and caramelizing onions is no quick task. It's a relatively simple task, but it's definitely not quick. So is it worth the time to make? That's 100% up to you. Do I think you should try it? Yes I do. It's absolutely delicious. Do I completely understand if you don't think you have the time to make this? Yes, I also get that. So I absolutely recommend making this, but no hard feelings if you don't. I made this dip with the intention of it being served warm, but after having it warm and cold, I genuinely can't say which way I prefer it. They're both good in their own right, so serve it however you prefer, or at least know that the leftovers are equally as good cold out of the fridge as they were hot off the stove. So to make this one, we are again going to start with a blended cream base. I'm using a can of drained rinsed beans, a half cup of cashews, and then 2 cups of broth, just like I did with the spinach artichoke dip. I'm using this bouillon paste, so I'm just going to add the paste for 2 cups worth of broth directly to the blender, and then add 2 cups of water and blend this all up until smooth. And you can set this aside while we start on the onions. You're going to need about 4 medium-sized onions for this dip. I slice the onions in half, slice them into thin half-moon slices, and then cut those in half so the biggest onion slices were not overly long. The largest ones were probably no bigger than 1.5 to 2 inches. They will shrink down considerably, but anywhere around that size is good. Now those slices will go into a pot that has been heated on the stove over medium heat. You're going to add about a tablespoon of oil to the warm pot and then add the onions in and begin to saute them. You can add a pinch of salt to help draw out some of the liquid in the onions. To caramelize these, you're going to cook them over medium to medium-low heat for somewhere between 30 and 45 minutes. You'll see by the end, they get to be a dark golden brown color. You can cook them for longer and get them even more brown, but for this particular dish, I don't think it's entirely necessary. You're going to stir these every few minutes for the first 30 minutes or so to prevent them from sticking or burning. There's a lot of stirring with this one. Towards the end of the cook time, they will have lost a lot of their moisture and you'll need to stir them more frequently to prevent them from burning. To caramelize them so that they are evenly cooked and browned throughout, but not burned or crispy, you're going to keep them cooking over a medium to medium-low heat. If they are sticking, you can add a small splash of water, stir more frequently, or lower the heat just a touch. I don't mind a small amount of sticking, and I'll scrape those bits up as I stir, or deglaze the pan with a bit of water. But for caramelizing, you want the onions to cook mostly evenly and not get overly crispy or browned on one side. You'll notice as they cook that they'll begin to clump together when you stir them. This means that you're starting to get closer to the end of the cook time. I'll stir them up and then spread them out again so that they're even across the surface of the pan. You'll also probably start to notice that they get shiny and look almost glazed in a way. Again, this is a good sign that you're in the right direction, and you'll notice it more as you get closer to the end of the cook time. As you can see here, the onions will go from white to more translucent, and eventually a light and then darker golden brown color. This took about 45 minutes, but it may take more or less time depending on your stove, the pot you're using, and the heat. So base it on their color, and once they get to this nice dark golden brown color that you see here, or a bit darker, you can call it good for this particular recipe. To the onions, you'll add 3 cloves of garlic that have been minced, 1 tablespoon of balsamic vinegar, and 1 teaspoon of Dijon mustard. Give everything a good stir and cook for about 2 more minutes. Now you'll add the blended cream that you set aside earlier and stir everything together. And now you're going to let it simmer for another 15 minutes or so until the dip has thickened considerably. Give it a stir every few minutes to prevent it from sticking too much. You can give this a taste and then season with black pepper before adding it to a serving dish. Again, this dip is really nice warm or cold, so I'd recommend trying it either way. Similar to the casserole dish earlier, using a pie plate is really nice because the sides of the plate help to keep everything contained, and it's a nice way to transport it if you're taking it to someone else's house. If if you're feeling really adventurous, maybe you can make a cute little dip trio like this. These recipes each make a decent amount, so you may have leftovers, which I personally think is nice, or if you have multiple holiday get-togethers, there would be enough that you can make a tray for each. You can find the recipes for each of these dips in the description below. Thanks for watching. I really hope you enjoy these dips, and figuratively, metaphorically, abstractly, let's eat together.